Before I say anything else, I want you to hear what a hunter in Washington state recorded on his phone in November of 2023. He was sitting in a ground blind with his hunting partner at 4 in the afternoon. His partner was beside him, 3 feet away, not speaking. His phone was recording because he had been filming a clearing for deer activity. On the recording, you can hear forest ambience. Wind. A few bird calls. And then, at the 1 minute 12 mark, you hear a voice. It says a name. Clear. Unmistakable. It is coming from the trees to their left, about 50 yards out. The voice is his hunting partner's voice. His hunting partner is sitting next to him. His hunting partner did not speak. We cannot play that audio for you because the hunter asked us not to publish it. But I have listened to it. The person who runs this channel has listened to it. And I am going to tell you honestly that it is the single most disturbing piece of audio I have encountered in the 3 years I have been researching this topic. Because it does not sound like an imitation. It does not sound like an approximation. It sounds exactly like a human being, speaking one word from a place where no human being was standing. Tonight we are going to talk about voice mimicry in the forests of the Pacific Northwest, what people are hearing, where they are hearing it, what the indigenous people of this region have known about it for centuries, what science can and cannot explain, and the one question that nobody in any tradition, in any field, has been able to answer: what does it want you to walk toward? If you have been watching this channel, you have already encountered voice mimicry. In our hunter compilation 2 weeks ago, a man named Jay heard his hunting partner Dale's voice calling his name from the timber in northern Wisconsin. Dale was standing next to him. The voice called 4 more times, getting closer, using the exact same cadence each time. In our search and rescue video last Monday, a SAR team heard a child crying in a canyon during a night operation. The missing person was a 50-year-old man. There were no children in the area. Command told them not to investigate. Those stories are part of a pattern that is wider, older, and more consistent than most people realize. Over the past 3 years, this channel and others in the wilderness horror community have collected hundreds of accounts from hikers, hunters, campers, rangers, and backcountry workers who describe the same basic experience. They hear a voice in the woods. The voice says their name or calls out in a way that sounds like someone they know. The voice comes from a direction where no person is present. And the voice is not approximate. It is not a similar-sounding stranger. It is, according to every witness, an exact reproduction of a specific human voice. The reports share several consistent features that appear across accounts from people who have no connection to each other and, in many cases, no awareness that anyone else has experienced the same thing. First, the mimicry is almost always a single word or a short phrase. A name. A call. Hey, over here. Help. It is never a sentence. It is never a conversation. Whatever is producing the sound appears to work in fragments, not in language. Second, the voice is identified by the listener as a specific person, not just any human voice. Their voice. A hunting partner. A spouse. A friend who is hiking with them but is in a different location. A family member. The witness does not hear a generic voice calling from the trees. They hear a voice they recognize, a voice that belongs to someone they know, coming from a place where that person is not. Third, when the mimicry repeats, it repeats identically. Same cadence, same inflection, same tone, same volume, like a recording being played on a loop. This detail appears in report after report. The voice does not vary. It does not respond to replies. It does not adapt. It produces the same sound, in the same way, at the same interval, as if it captured a single sample of a human voice and is replaying it. Fourth, and this is the detail that researchers find most difficult to dismiss, the mimicry often occurs in the presence of the person whose voice is being copied. Jay heard Dale's voice while Dale was standing beside him. Multiple accounts describe a husband hearing his wife's voice from the woods while his wife is in the tent. A father hearing his daughter calling from the tree line while his daughter is in his arms. The source of the mimicry has access to a voice that, in many cases, it could only have acquired by listening to the person speak at close range. The question of how it acquires the voice is one that nobody has answered. Our first account is The Couple at Huckleberry Camp. This account was submitted to us by a woman who asked us to call her Nora. She and her husband, she asked us to call him Eric, were car camping at a dispersed site in the Gifford-Pinchot National Forest in southern Washington in August of 2021. They had been camping at this site for 3 days. It was a favorite spot. They had visited it every summer for 6 years. The site was about 1.5 miles from the nearest forest road, accessed by a short, unmaintained trail. Heavy, old-growth Douglas fir. Dense understory. A creek about 30 yards from the clearing where they pitched their tent. Quiet. Remote. But not extreme backcountry. They could hear logging trucks on the forest road during the day. On the third night, Nora woke up at approximately 2 a.m. She was not sure what woke her. She lay in the tent listening. Eric was asleep beside her. The forest was quiet. Normal night sounds. Frog chorus from the creek. Occasional branch creak from wind in the canopy. Then she heard Eric call her name. From outside the tent, from the direction of the creek. She said the voice was Eric's voice. Not similar to Eric's voice. Not a voice that sounded like it could be Eric. It was Eric. The way he said her name. The specific cadence he used when he wanted her attention. The slight upward inflection at the end that he always used when he was calling to her from another room. She knew the sound of her husband saying her name as well as she knew anything in her life. And she heard it, clearly, coming from the creek, 30 yards away. Eric was asleep. In the tent. His breathing was steady and audible. He was right beside her. The voice called her name again. Same voice. Same cadence. Same inflection. From the same location near the creek. It was not louder. It was not closer. It was identical to the first call. Nora did not respond. She did not wake Eric. She said she does not know why she didn't wake him. She said it was not a conscious decision. Some part of her understood, instantly and without reasoning, that she should not acknowledge the voice, that responding to it, or moving toward it, would be a mistake. The voice called a third time. Same everything. Then it stopped. She lay in the tent for another hour without sleeping. The forest was quiet. Nothing else happened. In the morning, she told Eric what she had heard. He was skeptical, but not dismissive. He walked to the creek and looked around. There was no one there. No tracks in the mud along the bank. No sign that any person had been near the water. They packed up that morning, a day early. Nora said she has not been back to that site. She said the thing she cannot stop thinking about is not the voice itself. It is the fact that whatever made the sound knew exactly how Eric said her name. Not just the word, the way he said it. The personal, private, specific way that one person says another person's name when they have known them for years. Something was listening to them. Long enough to learn that. The Pacific Northwest has been home to indigenous peoples for at least 15,000 years. The coastal and inland nations of this region, including the Salish, Kwakiutl, Tlingit, Haida, and dozens of others, developed complex oral traditions over millennia that encode detailed knowledge of the natural world. These traditions are not mythology in the dismissive sense that Western culture sometimes uses that word. They are knowledge systems. They are records of observation accumulated over hundreds of generations by people who lived in these forests full-time, year-round, in an intimacy with the landscape that modern visitors cannot approximate. Several of these traditions describe entities associated with forests that can replicate human voices. Among Coast Salish nations, there are accounts of forest-dwelling beings that lure people away from camps and trails by calling to them in familiar voices. The specific names and characteristics vary by nation and by community, and I want to be clear that these are living cultural traditions, not extinct legends. I am not going to reproduce specific names or ceremonial details, because it is not my place to do so. What I will say is that the behavioral pattern described in these traditions matches the modern reports with uncomfortable precision. An entity in the forest. A copied voice. A call designed to draw a person away from safety and toward the source of the sound. These traditions also contain a consistent piece of guidance that mirrors the instinct Nora described. Do not respond. Do not follow the voice. Do not acknowledge that you have heard it. The traditions treat the mimicry as predatory. The voice is not a greeting. It is a lure. And the appropriate response, across multiple nations and multiple centuries of oral transmission, is silence. The Kwakiutl traditions include descriptions of forest beings associated with specific territories. These beings are understood to be protective of their domain and hostile to intrusion. Voice mimicry is described as one of several behaviors these beings use to manipulate human movement in the forest. The implication in these traditions is not that the voice is trying to communicate, it is trying to relocate you, to move you from where you are to where it wants you to be. I want to pause here and acknowledge something that I think is important. Modern Western culture tends to treat indigenous oral traditions as folklore, as stories, as cultural artifacts to be studied rather than information to be taken seriously. But these traditions describe, with specificity and consistency, a phenomenon that modern witnesses are independently reporting right now. Seekers and hunters with no knowledge of Salish or Kwakiutl traditions are describing the same behavior, the same patterns, the same instinctive response. Either every modern witness is coincidentally replicating centuries-old indigenous accounts by chance, or the indigenous peoples of this region were documenting something real, something that is still here. The obvious scientific question is whether any known animal in the Pacific Northwest can produce sounds that mimic human speech. Globally, vocal mimicry exists in several species. Corvids, the family that includes ravens, crows, and jays, are well-documented vocal mimics. Ravens in particular can reproduce a wide range of sounds, including human words. The Australian lyrebird is perhaps the most sophisticated vocal mimic in the animal kingdom, capable of reproducing chainsaws, camera shutters, and other complex sounds with remarkable fidelity. Certain parrot species can reproduce human speech. Some cetaceans have demonstrated limited vocal mimicry. In the Pacific Northwest specifically, the common raven is the most relevant candidate. Ravens are abundant in old-growth forests throughout the region. They are known to mimic sounds including human voices, dog barks, and mechanical noises. A raven producing a word or a short phrase is not outside the bounds of documented animal behavior. However, the raven explanation has significant problems when applied to the accounts we are discussing. First, raven mimicry sounds like a raven mimicking a human voice. It is recognizable as mimicry. It is often raspy, pitched differently from the original, and clearly produced by a non-human vocal apparatus. The witnesses in these accounts are not describing sounds that could be mistaken for a bird imitating a person. They are describing sounds that are indistinguishable from the actual person, identical in tone, cadence, pitch, and inflection. No documented raven mimicry has achieved that level of fidelity with a specific individual's voice. Second, ravens do not typically produce mimicry calls at night, when the majority of these encounters occur. Ravens are diurnal. They roost at night. A raven calling a specific human name from deep in a forest at 2 a.m. is not consistent with known raven behavior. Third, and most critically, the mimicry in these accounts reproduces not just words but personal vocal characteristics, the way a specific person says a specific name. The individual inflection, the private cadence. Raven mimicry is imitative in a general sense. It copies a sound, it does not copy a person. There is no known animal in the forests of the Pacific Northwest, or anywhere else on Earth, that can listen to a person speak and then reproduce that person's specific voice with enough fidelity to fool someone who has known them for years. If such an animal existed, it would represent a vocal capability unprecedented in the animal kingdom. It would be, from a biological standpoint, extraordinary. And yet, people keep hearing it. Now here's the second first-hand account. This account comes from a man who worked as a trail crew foreman for a federal land management agency in the Cascade Range for 11 years. He asked that we not identify the specific agency or the specific wilderness area. He is still employed. His crew was a 5-person team responsible for maintaining trails in a designated wilderness. The work involved week-long deployments in the backcountry. They would hike in on Monday, set up a base camp, work the trails, and hike out on Friday. They knew the terrain as well as anyone alive. Several members of the crew had been working the same wilderness for over a decade. In June of 2019, his crew was camped at a standard base camp location they had used dozens of times. Flat bench, good water access, established fire ring. Normal. Around 9 in the evening, still some light in the sky, one of his crew members, a woman he calls Rena, walked about 100 yards from camp to filter water from the creek. From camp, the foreman heard Rena call his name, her voice, from the direction of the creek. He called back and asked what she needed. No response. He called again. Nothing. Then Rena walked into camp from the opposite direction. She had not gone to the creek. She had walked to the latrine area, which was in the opposite direction from the water. She had not called his name. She had not spoken. He told her what he had heard. She looked at him and said, without hesitation, "It happened to Marcus last summer." His exact words. She said it like it was a known thing, like it was a fact of the job that she had been waiting for him to encounter. He asked her what she meant. She said that Marcus, a previous crew member, had heard the foreman's voice calling to him from the tree line during a deployment the previous year. Marcus had walked toward the voice, gotten about 30 yards from camp, and then stopped because something felt wrong. He turned around and came back. He told Rena about it, but did not tell the foreman because he did not want to seem unstable. The foreman said he spoke to Marcus by phone that week. Marcus confirmed the account. He said the voice had been the foreman's voice. Not similar. Exact. He said the reason he stopped walking toward it was that the voice called a second time and it was identical. Not just the same word. The same sound. The same recording. He said a real person calling twice would have slight variations in breath, in emphasis, in effort. This had none. It was a copy pasted into the air. The foreman told us he has worked in that wilderness for 11 years. He has heard the mimicry twice more since 2019, both times at established camp locations. Both times using the voice of someone on his crew. He does not report it, he does not document it. He tells his crew at the beginning of every season, if you hear someone calling you from the trees, and the person whose voice you hear is in camp, do not respond. Do not walk toward it. Note the time and the direction, and tell me in the morning. I asked him what he thought it was. He said, I have been in these woods for 11 years, and I do not think about it. The same way I do not think about the weather. It is a condition of the environment. You acknowledge it. You do not engage with it. You do your work and you go home. If you spend any time researching voice mimicry in wilderness settings, you will inevitably encounter the word skinwalker. In the popular internet imagination, skinwalkers have become a catch-all term for any entity in the woods that copies voices, appears as something it is not, or behaves in ways that suggest predatory intelligence. I want to be precise about this, because precision matters. The Yi-Nabishi of Navajo tradition is a specific cultural concept tied to specific beliefs, practices, and taboos within Navajo culture. It is not a generic forest monster. It is not interchangeable with every unexplained entity in every forest. Using the term loosely is not just inaccurate. It is disrespectful to a living culture whose members have explicitly and repeatedly asked outsiders to stop treating their spiritual beliefs as entertainment content. That said, the behavioral comparison is worth acknowledging. Navajo descriptions of skinwalker behavior include voice mimicry, the copying of familiar voices to draw people away from safety. This is the same core behavior described in the Pacific Northwest accounts and in the indigenous traditions of the Salish and Kwakiutl. The mechanism is consistent. An entity copies a human voice and uses it as a lure. This behavioral consistency across geographically separated indigenous traditions is significant. The Navajo Nation is based in the Four Corners region of the American Southwest. The Salish and Kwakiutl nations are based in the Pacific Northwest, over 1,000 miles away. These traditions developed independently, in entirely different ecosystems, among peoples with distinct languages, cultures, and spiritual frameworks. And yet, both describe an entity in the wilderness that copies human voices to manipulate human behavior. Modern reports of voice mimicry cluster geographically, but not exclusively in the Southwest or the Pacific Northwest. Accounts have been collected from the Appalachian Mountains, the Upper Midwest, the Rocky Mountains, northern Canada, and Scandinavia. The clustering is densest in areas with large tracts of old-growth forest, low human population density, and established indigenous traditions that reference the phenomenon. Whether this reflects the distribution of an actual phenomenon or simply the distribution of people who are familiar enough with the concept to report it is an open question. But the consistency is difficult to ignore. Across thousands of miles, across centuries, across cultures with no contact, the same behavior is described the same way. Something in the forest copies your voice. It uses your voice to call to the people you are with. It wants them to come closer. And every tradition that describes it says the same thing. Do not go. Here's our third first-hand account. This is the account I have thought about the most. It was submitted by a man in Oregon. Father of two, he told us he had never shared it with anyone except his wife. In July of 2022, he took his 7-year-old daughter on a weekend camping trip in the Mount Hood National Forest. They had an established car camping site at a maintained campground. Not backcountry, not remote. A campground with numbered sites, a pit toilet, and a camp host. Other families were camping within earshot. This was not deep wilderness. This was a family campground on a summer weekend, Saturday night. His daughter had gone to sleep in the tent around 8:30. He was sitting by the fire, reading on his phone, about 20 feet from the tent. The campground was quiet. He could hear other campers talking in the distance. Normal night. At approximately 9:15, he heard his daughter call to him from the tree line behind their campsite. Not from the tent, from the trees. About 40 yards into the forest. Daddy. Just the one word. Her voice. Her exact voice. The specific way his daughter said that word, with the slight elongation of the second syllable that she had been doing since she learned to talk. He knew his daughter's voice, the way Nora knew Eric's voice, the way Jay knew Dale's voice. It was not a similar child. It was his child. Calling from the darkness between the trees, he stood up. He almost walked toward it. He told us he was already 2 steps toward the tree line before something stopped him. He described it as a feeling, not a thought. A physical sensation in his chest, like a hand pressing against his sternum, pushing him back. He stopped. He stood still. The voice called again. Daddy. Same voice, same word, same elongation of the second syllable, same distance, same direction, identical. Not a child calling a second time. A recording playing a second time, he turned around and walked to the tent. He unzipped it. His daughter was inside, asleep, in her sleeping bag, exactly where he had left her an hour ago. She had not moved. She had not woken up. She was breathing steadily in the deep, motionless sleep of a 7-year-old who had spent the day hiking. He zipped the tent closed, sat back down by the fire, and stared at the tree line for the next 3 hours. The voice did not call again. He told us 2 things in his submission that I want to share exactly as he wrote them. The first thing he said was, "I have never been so close to walking into the woods in the dark. If it had called a 3rd time, I think I would have gone, not because I was fooled, because it was her voice. And some part of me that is deeper than logic was not going to ignore my daughter calling for me, even when I knew it was not my daughter." The second thing he said was, whatever that thing is, it knew. It did not use a random child's voice, it used hers, which means it was close enough to hear her speak that day. It was in those woods while my daughter was playing, while I was cooking dinner, while we were laughing and talking and I was telling her about the trees. It was there, listening, learning her voice, and then it used what it learned to try to pull me into the dark. He has not taken his daughter camping since. Here is what we know. People are hearing voices in the forests of the Pacific Northwest that belong to people who are not there. The voices are reported as exact replicas, not approximations. The mimicry repeats identically, suggesting a reproduced sample rather than active vocalization. Indigenous peoples of this region have documented this behavior for centuries and treat it as predatory. No known animal can replicate a specific human voice with the fidelity described by witnesses. And every tradition, every instinct, and every experienced backcountry worker who has encountered it says the same thing. Do not respond, do not follow, do not go toward the voice. We do not know what is producing the sound. We do not know how it acquires specific voices. We do not know what it wants. We do not know what happens to the person who follows the voice into the trees, because the people who follow it are not the people who submit reports. Think about that for a moment. Every account we have, every story in this video, every report in every database and every forum and every thread comes from someone who did not follow the voice. We only hear from the people who stayed. We have no data from the people who went. We do not know what is in the trees, but we know it has your voice, and it is calling. If you have heard your name called in the woods by a voice that should not have been there, I need to hear from you. Location, date, time, whose voice it used, what you did. Every account helps build the pattern. Submit to the email in the description. Subject line: voice mimicry. If you missed our SAR video on Monday where a search and rescue team was told not to investigate a child crying in a canyon, that story is directly connected to what we covered tonight. It is linked below. We post every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Subscribe. And the next time you are in the woods and you hear someone you know calling your name from the trees, do what every tradition on this continent says to do. Stay where you are.